seek to make our university communities capable of responding to regional, national, and international challenges, always keeping in mind a profound sense of justice. And to that end, we reach out to the internationalization of higher education as one of the means of achieving this. On behalf of our group of colleagues, I would like to warmly welcome you to the third talk in the autumn 2022 edition of the SUJ Internationalization Conference cycle, in which experts share their good practices in this field with our university communities and sister and partner universities. On this occasion, the theme addressed will be internationalization practices and opportunities to be developed and explored. We welcome each member of the university community of SUJ, AUSHAL, and our partner universities who accompany us today. And so it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest and a personal friend of mine, Michelle Stewart, who will give the talk titled International Collaboration Spotlight on Europe. Michelle Stewart is the immediate past president of the European Association for International Education, EAIE, and is also the director for internationalization in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. She has worked in higher education for over 20 years. After graduating in public administration, she worked for 4 years in Spain, where she developed executive education courses. When she returned to Scotland, she was an advisor to the Lord Provost of Glasgow City Council. Having worked on internationalization for several years, Michelle has a strong commitment to partnership development and student mobility. At the University of Strathclyde, she established many overseas links, including the Mexico-UK Study Abroad Consortium, in partnership with a number of UK universities. Michelle has served on external boards, including Operating Board Education UK Partnership, Chair Scottish Universities International Group, SUIG, Chair and Butex, British Universities Transatlantic Exchange Association. She has an extensive network of colleagues across the UK and overseas. Michelle, I'm handing the mic over to you. Welcome.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much to Alison for inviting me to join you at your session today. I believe this is the Society of Jesuit Universities, and I've been invited as the immediate past president of the EAIE, so that's the European Association for International Education, to just give you a kind of quick sketch through some of the issues that we're dealing with in Europe. And I think one of the main takeaways could be that we'll find that the issues that we're dealing with are very similar to the issues that you're dealing with. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I know that we'll have time for Q&A during the live session. So please do ask questions, because I see this as an opportunity for me to learn from you as well. I'll just tell you one quick anecdote about the last time I visited Mexico. I was really struck by just how advanced the universities in Mexico were in terms of IT access and Wi-Fi. I think in the UK we were still putting cables in the ground. So I always assume that Mexicans are always a wee bit further ahead than I think in Europe we like to think that we are. So I'd say this is a two-way engagement process. So please do ask lots of questions and let me hear from your experience as well. So I'll just share my screen with you now. Hopefully you can see that. Hi, so I'd like to just share my screen with you now, and I'll take you through the programme that I'd like to cover. So I think many of you will know a little bit about the European Association for International Education, but I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about what we do. The next two items, I think we're all looking at inclusion and diversity, but also how do we reconcile issues of sustainability and travel, but also how do we embed the Sustainable Development Goals into curriculum. And the other thing I'd like to just touch on it, because it's such a massive development within Europe, it's the European Universities Initiative. And then sadly, I'd like to talk a little bit about Ukraine and how European universities are responding to the invasion of Ukraine. And then finally, within the UK, and it's not so much a European development, but it's where I'm based. So within the UK, we now have the Turing scheme. So I'll say a little bit about that as well. So just first of all, to tell you a little bit about the EAIE. So we were founded in 1989, and we're really a member-led organisation, and we're based in Amsterdam. And our purpose is to serve Europe and the global community as a whole. I won't go through this just now, but if you're interested in learning more about the structure of the EAIE, in this presentation that I'll share with you, you can click on this and get a really good overview of how we're put together. But just very quickly, we have the board. So as the immediate past president, or when I was the president, I was a member of the board, but now I will join the General Council. We have the office, we have expert communities, and we have committees. So just to tell you a little bit more about our structure, we have a global team of dedicated staff as well as experts in the field. So we have 30 staff members from 16 different countries. So the office really serves the association, but we also have 120 plus volunteers from 23 different countries, and they're organised into these areas of expertise, and I'm sure that you will recognise many of them from your work. They cover things like business education, but also health and welfare education, internationalisation at home. So that's a fairly new group, and that really has come out of the pandemic. Some people were always interested in internationalisation at home, or COIL as we sometimes call it, and that really is a group that's now become much bigger than it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. We also have language and culture. So I think most people, when they look down this list, they'll probably pull out 3 or 4 or even more that they can relate to. And all of our content is curated around these different themes. Just a little bit about the size of the organisation. We have 3,000 EAIE members, and typically at our annual conference we have over 6,000 people. So the most recent conference in Barcelona, so that had been cancelled in 2020, and thankfully it took place, and we had our biggest conference ever. And we estimate that the field in Europe is around 50 to 60,000 people. So that's based on the number of universities and the typical size of an international office. So we're reaching a good portion of the sector, but we think we can do more. And during the pandemic, because we were able to offer a lot more online content, our reach increased to about 10,000 people each year. So that's just to give you an idea of the size and scale of the EAIE. So now just to talk a little bit about the other themes that we mentioned that I would like to cover. So the first one is around inclusion and diversity. And within the Erasmus priorities, it's one of 3 key pillars. So I'm going to talk a little bit about inclusion and diversity, but also green Erasmus and how the EAIE is responding to these things. So in terms of inclusive, this is about embedding and institutionalizing norms, behaviors and systems, but also trying to evolve the terminology around what do we mean by inclusion and diversity, and how do we prioritize because there's a whole range of different things that we can do around this theme. And also, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the tools that we're developing in the UK and in Europe around involving and empowering underrepresented populations of participants in order to ensure equal and equitable opportunities for everyone. And this is part of the European Charter for, the Erasmus Charter for Higher Education. So everyone has to sign up to these principles. And what we're really being encouraged to do is to establish built-in mobility opportunities such as mobility windows within curricula to help facilitate the participation of students from all study fields. So again, there's a recognition that not all subjects lend themselves to student mobility. So really there's this call to try and encourage mobility no matter what subject you are studying. But also to try and include underrepresented groups, whether they are unable to take part in mobility due to a physical barrier, financial barrier, mental health, whatever the barrier is, we have to try and address these things. So I think one of the things I wanted to share with you today was just around some of the toolkits that have been developed in partnership with organisations such as Universities UK International and the Erasmus Student Network. So they started off with trying to understand the barriers. So they have a report I think it pulls on about 12,000 students and over 700 members of staff to try and explore why certain students don't feel that they are able to go abroad. And I think that the report's really, really useful because it explains some of the barriers, but also it goes into some of the tools and techniques that we can use within our institutions. And one of the things that they found, and it was in itself a barrier, is actually around communication. So finding ways to talk to students in a way that they will understand, which is maybe different to, say, someone of my age group, where when I was studying abroad, there was no TikTok or YouTube. So this manual helps to unpack that to make it a more inclusive communication tool. But one of the other things in the report, one of the barriers is mainly around finances, and sometimes that can be a perception that students can't afford to go abroad, or that it will be very expensive. And one of the, if you like, recommendations of the report was also to provide better information on the financial implications of studying abroad. So again, in the slide at the end, there will be links to all of these reports. And just to mention another report that was prepared by Universities UK International, they also looked at the impact of short-term study abroad. And again, that was to try and address some of the perceptions that a short-term student mobility was maybe not as impactful as a longer term, say a semester or a year. And what they found was that the benefits to students were pretty much the same around intercultural competence, confidence building, and also importantly that it gave students the confidence to think, well, actually I could maybe go for longer the next time. So I think these are all really excellent toolkits that we can that you can access. Just to say a little bit about the EAIE in terms of inclusive international education, it's at the heart of our values, but also where we do a lot of work just providing information for people who want to maybe dive into this topic in a bit more detail. So as I was saying earlier, we now have quite a lot of content that was developed during the pandemic. So we now produce a podcast every single week. And I've highlighted here some of the podcasts that you can go in and listen to at any time. So things like access and equity and inclusion, or celebrating Pride, aiming for more, so addressing the LGBTQ population. And so I won't read all of these out, but just to let you know that there's a lot of content on the EAIE website around inclusion and diversity. The other topic I just wanted to touch on was sustainability. And there's lots of different ways we can talk about this, but the ones I wanted to highlight, within Europe, it's possible to talk about Erasmus by train, but obviously if you're arranging mobility between, say, Mexico and other parts of Europe, that's just not possible. But what we're trying to do with Erasmus by train is ensure that the funding is there for students who decide to go by train. So at the moment, there is a supplement available to students, but it doesn't really cover the cost, and I don't think it incentivizes students to travel by train. The other initiative it's called Students, well, in Dutch, it's written in Dutch on this slide, it's Students for Tomorrow. And again, this is a student-led grassroots initiative, really encouraging universities to be greener, to be more sustainable. But what they're doing is creating their own rankings around the universities where their green credentials are good. And I think this is really important because it means that the students coming through are starting to really rank and value universities that take this seriously. And I think increasingly that will become more and more important when universities are marketing and promoting themselves to students. There will be an expectation that universities are addressing this. And it is, again, part of the Green Erasmus priority. Just again, and I wanted to highlight some of the things that the EAIE is doing. So we, again, that this tension around travel and sustainability is something that we have to grapple with when we are bringing 6,000 people together. A lot of them will travel by plane, but also we're encouraging people to come to the conference using sustainable travel. So this year we started to keep a record of everyone traveling by train. So a lot of the people around or who were able to travel by train came to the conference. So this is something that we're really encouraging. But we also, in terms of sourcing venues and sourcing materials, we also have that as part of our decision-making criteria around the venues we choose, but also all the different supplies that we have during the conference. So we do a lot of recycling. We don't have any plastic at the conference. So I think the key message is here, sometimes when we talk about internationalisation, student mobility or staff mobility and sustainability, there's a sense that, well, what can we do? Because it's just a fact that we are contributing to the problem. And I think for me, it's to try and tackle the things that we can, but to be pragmatic, that we are at the end of the day trying to encourage students to go to different places, and it's not always possible to do that in as green a way as we can. In terms of resources, if anybody wants to learn more about the different schemes in Europe, we have, again, these podcasts where people are really talking, the people who are organising these things. So we have a podcast on Erasmus by train, but also business education and the common good. So that's really looking at, if you have to travel and if you have to go abroad, what's the impact of you being there? Are people really making the most of their time? And I think that's something that I think is really encouraging. And if anybody wants to know more about what they can do, I think the CANI Accord is really useful. So this is again, a grassroots initiative, no formal status, just a bunch of people who got together to look at these issues, but also to come up with solutions. And after COP26 in Glasgow, they got together and created the CANI Accord. So that's a Climate Action Network for International Educators. And they have I think it's a 47-point plan. And you can become a signatory to the Accord if you can sign up to 5 or more of the different promises within the Accord. So EAIE was one of the first signatories to the Accord, and also we, as part of our commitment, was to promote the Accord. So I'm doing that today, hopefully, but also we recognise the work they're doing at our conference in Barcelona. So that's the the award that you see there in the corner. So we awarded that to CANI for the work that they're doing, and we'll continue to promote the accord. The other thing I just wanted to talk about briefly was the European Universities Initiative, and I have to say right at the outset, this is because I'm based in the UK, I'm not so involved in this initiative, but there's lots and lots of things that you can read. So I just wanted to at least just mention it to you, and also just to sort of give you some indication of the size. So this involves more than 280 higher education institutions. It has up to 5 million from the European Commission, and that includes 2 million, as well as 2 million from the Horizon 2020 fund. And it will include 27 member states, but also Iceland, Norway, Serbia, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. I think going back to the previous slide where you could actually see the map where all the different partner institutions are, there aren't that many dots on the UK map, and that's obviously linked to us coming out of Brexit, but it's really good to see that UK universities are still participating in the scheme, and hopefully moving forward more UK universities will be added. But it's a massive initiative, and I think again my last slide has a link to the interim report where they're looking at the success of the first phase of the initiative, and I think it's fair to say that any kind of alliance of this on this kind of scale, some of the different alliances will usually include 9 to 10 different partners. So most of you will know just how challenging it is to work with partner universities, all with their different governance structures. So most of my colleagues who are involved in this initiative say that it's early days, but certainly the guiding principles behind it are really good. It's to encourage student staff mobility, but also collaboration around the big research themes that we're all grappling with around the climate, manufacturing, artificial intelligence. So really exciting work, and I think it's a bold and a brave way forward, and I think despite some of the teething problems that I hear, I think it will eventually settle down and do an amazing job to bring all the different European universities together, working in a very collaborative way. And again, the great thing is that funding has gone into the scheme, and that will obviously help. The other thing I just wanted to talk about was Ukraine, and I assume in Mexico you will still be following, even though it's not so close to you, you'll be following what's happening in Ukraine. It certainly impacts, well, it's impacted the whole of Ukraine, but also students. So the international students who were studying in Ukraine, a lot of Indian students were displaced, but obviously Ukrainian students and staff and people all over Europe now are trying to host Ukrainians. So I just wanted to say a little bit about what has been happening within the EAIE, but also higher education as a whole. So at a European level, I think the main thing there has been to sever ties with Russia, and that includes taking Russian institutions out of the different schemes that are operating. But then also at a national level, really most universities now have severed ties with Russian universities. And then the response, so these are the kind of things that were in the early days, it was about stopping doing things, but then we're now in the next phase of trying to really work with Ukrainian universities to host students and staff. So within the EAIE, we created an ideas lab. And the purpose of that was to really find out from Ukrainian institutions what it was that they needed from us. And they were really just really ready to share their needs, wants, desires. And they broke it down into sort of almost like 3 phases. There was the immediate need in the early days of the invasion to help students complete their degrees. So that was assisting with exams, but then talking about the next phase, it would be around hosting students and staff and perhaps sharing research labs. But then they're now talking, or they have from the very beginning been talking about how can we help them rebuild Ukraine, the assumption being that they will triumph over this terrible invasion, and they'll be looking for help with capacity building. So again, within the EAIE, what we're trying to do is facilitate some of the ask that they've made of us, and also to recognise the work that they're doing. So again, during our conference, we awarded the Vision and Leadership Award to the whole of the Ukrainian higher education sector. And that was really a recognition of the fact that it would be impossible to single out one institution, given the amazing work they're doing as a whole under very, very challenging circumstances. So the last thing I just wanted to touch on was something that's very UK specific. So it's not a European development, but I think the UK coming out of Europe is something that concerns, well, certainly the UK universities, but also our European partners, because really, you know, now that we cannot participate in Erasmus, how do we ensure good mobility between the UK and the rest of Europe? And I think initially the UK government had hoped that they could still join Erasmus, but I don't know if you understand this expression, wanting your cake and eating it, which means that you can't always have it entirely your own way. And so that just was not possible. So to be fair, the UK government did introduce the Turing scheme, and the Welsh government has also responded with the TAITH scheme. And I'll just tell you a little bit what's different about these two different schemes. So just to explain a little bit about the two different schemes. So I think many of you will already have heard of Turing. So this is a UK-wide scheme to support study and work abroad. It's important to clarify that this covers higher education, further education, the VET, so vocational education, and also schools. And it is designed to fund international opportunities in education and training. And it's open to UK and British overseas territories, so mainly the education and training sector within the UK. And I've got some stats here for 2022 and 2021, the first year of the programme. So in 2021, the budget was 98.5 million, and in 2021, 372 projects were funded. And actually this year that's gone down to 317. I don't have the budget for 2022, but I think that the reason for that decline is because the budget, I believe, has been reduced. And obviously, because everybody now knows how the scheme works, in 2021 we had 412 applications, but this year we had 512. So people are putting in more applications, but I think the reality of how much it costs to run these schemes is a challenge, and I don't think the funding is there to meet all the different projects that could be funded. In 2021, it was due to fund 41,000 placements, and in 2022 it will be again lower, so 38,000. So still, you know, significant numbers of mobilities. And the number of countries it covers, it's 150 study destinations. That's not countries, that's just all the different university students will be going to. But one of the big criticisms of Turing has been that it only funds outgoing students. And therefore, unlike Erasmus, where it was a reciprocal funding arrangement, how can we engage in mobility when it will only fund our students going out? And obviously, as you all know, exchange is all about a two-way process. So the Welsh government has responded to this issue, creating their own scheme. So the TAITH is actually Welsh for journey, and it creates, or is due to create 25,000 opportunities for students. But their scheme is a bit different, because the idea is that it will be 15,000 people from Wales going out on exchange, but also it will fund 10,000 people coming into Wales. And the investment there is 65 million, which when you look at the UK scheme looks comparable, but that is for 4 years. And so therefore it is a lower budget, but that's to be expected given the size of the higher education sector in Wales is obviously much smaller than the UK. So in Wales, I think they have like 5 universities versus the UK scheme where potentially they could be trying to fund 178 universities. So people ask me what's happening in Scotland, and I know that the Scottish Government have indicated their willingness to bring in a scheme that would be closer to the Welsh scheme. They also had hoped that Scotland could still participate in Erasmus, but that has been ruled out. It's just not possible. If you're not within Europe, you cannot participate in Erasmus. So, but the details of the Scottish scheme are still to be announced. I also just wanted to share with you another, I think it's quite interesting, the breakdown of the different countries supported by Turing. The scheme's been criticised for funding mobility to mainly English-speaking countries. So you'll see that there, 25% going to the US, Canada and Australia. So I think that's a fair comment. You know, is it really encouraging intercultural or raising awareness when really they're going to countries with similar languages, and certainly in the USA, well, it's quite similar cultures as well. I think it's interesting that the next group, Southeast Asia and Asia, 23% going to countries like China, Japan, Hong Kong, South Korea, and then much lower numbers going to Europe. Now, I think one of the reasons for that is that within the UK, we're still able to participate in Erasmus until 2023. So I think the numbers for Europe will change as soon as we come out of Erasmus completely. Then I think this graph will start to look quite different. I think it's great to see that Mexico has 471 placements. So that's sitting just below the Netherlands, which is quite a surprise, really. And I think that's also a really good indication of just how much engagement there is with Mexican universities. And then the other little arrow I put in there was to, again, highlight that Russia would have been part of the scheme, but there is no mobility taking place between Russia at the moment. So I said I would share all these different links at the end. So these are just some of the things that you can click on and get more information. And I think now so I won't read all of this out, but just suffice to say there's a lot more detail you can go into with all of these things, and obviously all the different podcasts that I've mentioned, you can access them on the EAIE website. So these are, this is the EAIE website here. We have content on all the different channels, and I think the plan now is to open up for Q&A. And as I said at the beginning of my presentation, I'd really like to hear your observations on what I've shared with you, but also just to hear the kind of questions that you might have of me. So I think now I'll stop sharing, and then we'll hand it over to, I think, whoever's going to curate the Q&A. So thank you so much for listening to me, and also to Alison again for inviting me to participate in your session today. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks, Michelle. That was great. That was really good talk. And I think it was especially interesting for us over here in Latin America, because quite often we get lots and lots of information of what's going on with our northern neighbour, you know, NAFTA and all that kind of thing. So the point of view from Europe, I think, was refreshing, because it was perhaps something new for some of us here in these chats. It was great to hear what was going on for EAIE, for the kind of things that were being focused on at the conference, and I could see that I could see palpable attempts to focus on sustainability, you know, the products which were used, and I know that any food that was left over during the lunches was donated to local food banks, etc. So I know that that's something that's important to EAIE, and we attendants, or people that were at the conference, they could really see that. And some of the things that you mentioned there are not just for folks in Europe, obviously, it's for all of us. Inclusion, sustainability, diversity, things which are common to all of us on both sides of the Atlantic, all over the world. And I really liked that, in fact, I've gone into a few of them, the toolkits that EAIE has made up and the podcasts. I would recommend them. They're very good, they're very useful. And before I hand over to Majo, because she's going to be doing the questions and the questions part of things, I'm wondering, that last point you talked about touring, when you said that people from the UK can still go to Europe until 2023, and that you think that that might change afterwards. Do you think that might be good news for Latin America, for example? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I was trying to point out there, when you look at that grid, it's surprising just how low the numbers are from being funded going to other countries in Europe. But because we had the UK universities had a grant, they can still use that up until, I think it's like summer 2023. But beyond that, then I imagine then what we're all working on is reciprocal agreements. So we've not had to have those in place because they were all covered through Erasmus. But definitely, because Turing funding now can be used for non-European countries, so that's why we're seeing more mobility being funded now to places like Mexico, but also places being funded in Southeast Asia, for example. So I think that the whole landscape around where students are going from the UK is going to change. And in some ways, that's quite a good thing, because I'm sure you do a lot of student mobility between Mexico and the US. And that's the same for UK universities, just to use that as an example. So we were also sending lots of students to the United States and Canada before we withdrew from Europe, but none of that activity was funded. So all of that activity had to be funded by students or through support from the universities. So now students going to non-European destinations can be funded through Turing. So I would definitely say that's a bit of a game changer. And already you're seeing, 471 mobilities to Mexico is a really great start. And I know that you and I have worked on a program whereby students can come for short-term placements, and then we'll reciprocate with them semester or year-long exchange. So that's a great development. So yeah, I do see it as a game changer. But I don't think the full, if you like, how it will look will be apparent until after summer of 2023. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to hand over the mic now to Majo, who'll be curating, etc., the questions. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Alison and Michelle. So to all our participants, you are now allowed to open your mouth and turn on your cameras. Please feel free to ask any question in English or Spanish, and we can gladly translate them so our speaker can answer them. So please, when you want, you can or just share the question in our chat. So please. Go on.
I should say that if you ask me the question in Spanish, I'll probably be able to understand, but I won't be able to respond in Spanish. I haven't looked at it.
That's marvelous. Yeah. Thank you very much, Michelle.
No problem.
So I don't know, anybody has, or in our live session in YouTube, do we have any question? So it says, what's the advantage of attending EAIE to NAF?
Well, if you are looking to find out more about things like Turing, so again, this is a brand new scheme. most UK universities send representatives to the European Association for International Education, but also I know that a lot of you will probably be working with Spanish universities, so they will also be there. So it's the go-to place for meeting up with European partners. It's slightly smaller than NAFSA, so we have 6,000 attendees. I think I mentioned that in the introduction, and NAFSA obviously has 10,000. So one of the reasons I always give for maybe focusing on one of these conferences, we are all aware of sustainability. So rather than maybe going to have or having several visits to Europe, really, if you come to EAIE, you can practically see all of your partners in 1 week. And we do increasingly see partners coming from other parts of the world, Australia, China, not so much obviously in the past 2 years, but yeah, there's really a very global audience, and you can get an awful lot done.
Thank you, Michelle. So we have another question here. It says, how can we promote more participation between European institutions and Mexican institutions?
Well, it's an easy thing for me to answer, because it's an easy sell for me. I've always worked with the Mexican universities. I set up a consortium years ago, so I understand how good Mexican universities are. Sorry, I'm only speaking about Mexico. I know that there will be other people from other countries, but that's the country that I've worked with the most. But I think you have to meet people and have that meeting of minds, reassuring people that that they'll get the curriculum that they need, that they'll get the accommodation they need. So I think that's where coming to the conference is really good. I don't want to be too much in selling mode, but I do think it's a really good way to seek out new partners. I mean, the key thing we all want to know about is, will our students get the experience that they need? And you have to start with curriculum first and foremost, but then you can get into some of the other details. But for me, it's always been an easy thing. I've visited several universities in Mexico, and I know just how good they are, and our students have an amazing time whenever they go there.
Thank you again. It is very interesting to know that at least some of the European institutions are very easy attached to our Mexican institutions. So another question there. Is there another question for the public? Okay, another from our YouTube session. Yes. So it is possible to help Ukrainian institutions through your program?
If Mexican universities were interested in either twinning or hosting students or staff, after the session, I can put you in touch with a company. The company is based in the UK, but they have been helping UK universities with this twinning process. So they have now, I think, launched 71 twinning partnerships between UK and Ukraine. Now, there are other initiatives going on with the Dutch, the Germans, the Austrians. They're all doing these different things. But I think one of the main things where this company can help is helping you to identify potential partners and explaining what the commitment might be. So I think that would be the best way to make contact with them to find out if there's anything you can do. The Ukrainian universities are really well organized. So if you contact any of them, they will tell you exactly, quite quickly what they're looking for and how you can help them.
Thank you very much again. So I don't know, anybody who wants another question here? No, it seems that it's okay for Alison. Yes.
I just want to add something about the Ukraine part. At our university, we were approached by, I think it's the Catholic University of Ukraine, who were interested in doing COIL with us. Not so much student exchange. It was difficult for them to send students so far away to Mexico. But I believe Majo has already started conversations with them to see if we can set up at least a COIL group, at least.
Yeah.
So there are things that we're trying to do even as far away as Latin America.
Yeah, I think that would be good. You know, they're looking for different ways to engage their students, because they'll have students, you know, in places like the UK, but you know, in other places where maybe they can't get access to classes or to materials. So I think anything you can do to reach out to them would be great. And even just to let them know that, you know, that you want to help, even if it's not possible. They really appreciate the fact that people around the world are so supportive of them. And I think that's a really good message to send out.
Yeah, if you can get that information about the twinning partner Ukraine UK thing, I'll make sure that the rest of the SUJ universities get hold of it. Okay.
Great.
Any more questions, Majo, or we good?
Yeah, it seems that it's good. So thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you very much, Alison.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. So we thank everybody for your participation, especially our guest star today, Michelle Stewart, to whom I'd like to present a certificate in recognition of her talk today, and that's, you'll be getting the copy of that certificate, Michelle, and it's signed by the different directors of the SUJ universities in Mexico. Okay, so that's for you. So thank you very much for today, and we would like to invite everyone to follow us in the autumn 2022 lecture series. Our next talk that we're having, you might know her, Michelle, I'm not sure. The next talk we're having is called Cultivating Global Citizens Through Transformational Encounters, and it will be given by Dr. Diane Chio De Francesco of Xavier University, Ohio on November 3rd. And all information can be found on the event website that we've got for these SUJ talks. And there, Ceci has just put the website up on the chat for you to have a look at it. And on that website, we've got previous talks and we've got today's talks, and we'll have the next talk by Diane, which is coming up in November. We thank you all for your support by filling in a very short evaluation form that's going to be put up in the chat just now to get your feedback about today's conference. And I thought it was great. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on and doing this for us. And I know that it's not an ideal time for you. Not too bad. It's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so not too bad for you just now.